Hello, everyone. My name is Vedatri, and I am a program consultant here at CAM. And I'm so happy to be here with you. Before we start the event and my conversation with filmmakers, I would like to thank and acknowledge our wonderful co-presenters, who are organizations who serve and support diverse communities. For this program, we would like to thank Superfest and Asian Leadership Alliance, who have been instrumental in helping us put this fantastic program together. Programs like CamFest 2021 and CAM's other year-round programs are made possible by our community of supporters around the world. Help us bring compelling and diverse Asian American stories to light. Donate or join as a CAM member at CAM's secure website, caamedia.org, that is cammedia.org. For a limited time, new members can save 15% on our friend and supporter memberships using the promo code Celebrate Stories. That's CELEBRATE Stories in the plural. And now to start the program, you just watched the shorts program called We Lived Here, which is a collection of short docs and feature films. Which is a collection of short docs and fiction films where diverse filmmakers come together to explore lives in the United States that are often unsung and underrepresented, but which, in my opinion, these lives are what makes America actually great. And the first short film in that program is Keep SARAY Home, directed by Brian Redondo, who is joining us here now. Hello, Brian. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me, and thanks for watching and hosting the film.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for sharing your fantastic film with us. As our viewers know, Keep SARAY Home is about immigrants, immigration, and deportation. Often the news cycles will have us believe that family deportations or like family separations of immigrants are something that are distant, that are happening in the borders of the country. But your film, Brian, changes that idea and kind of shows us how close to home it is. So yeah, if you could just start with what made you want to make this film.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you that in the mainstream media and probably the majority of people out there feel like deportation and immigration are issues that really only impact the Latinx community, that really only pertain to communities living at the US-Mexico border. But that's definitely not the case, right? And with this film, what I was hoping to show and really highlight was the fact that Asian Americans really need to be part of this conversation around immigration and deportation. And even more so, we need to be looking at the particular case of the refugee community within the Asian American community. So, Southeast Asians, people from Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam who came to the US as refugees have a very unique and particular situation living in the U.S., with refugee status, but who are also still at the same time being targeted for deportation, and that really increased under the Trump administration, and unfortunately it continues now into the Biden administration, and so it was an issue that I really wanted to kind of put a spotlight on for people to get a better understanding of both Southeast Asian refugee communities as a whole, and also how these issues really impact us as Asian Americans.
Oh, and also on top of immigration, I think your film also puts a focus on incarceration, another social justice issue that we often don't associate Asian communities with, primarily because of the racist model minority myth. And you touch upon that with a lot of sensitivity, but you also kind of like focus and highlight it. Would you like to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so I think that, it's a necessary part of the conversation, right? The reason why Southeast Asian refugees are being deported in large numbers is because ICE has been targeting people that they deem unworthy to be here, because they have some sort of past conviction, in their 2-3 decade lives here in the U.S. And so the deportation of refugees back to countries where they fled war, for for crimes that were committed decades and decades ago that were already paid for, to me is a grave injustice. I'm trying to, through the film, I'm trying to ask the question about who we are as Americans, and what is it that we stand for, or if we as a country heavily bombed another country and then created refugees, and then so we brought in those people into the U.S., and then now after they've rebuilt their lives, we're sending them away from their homes and their families, because they committed a crime, but they've already paid their time and served time, for those crimes. Like, why are we treating them in such a way? And I think you can extrapolate that to people who have been incarcerated overall, right? Like, why do people who have served their time, why do they have problems after leaving prison, right? Like, why do they have problems finding jobs? Why do they have problems getting loans, finding housing, all sorts of things? And so in the case of SARAY, he is somebody who really rebuilt his life. He's a pillar in his own community. He has a family. He's raising children who are, bright and have lots of potential to really contribute back to our society. But why is he being punished again for something that he did over 25 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, like, and whatever serving time within a broken system means, right? I would love to go on with this conversation. And honestly, Brian, this is just the start of the conversation. So, and I also saw your film harp on the importance of communities banding together to organize amongst themselves. So I was wondering if you could share maybe social media handles for your films, for your film, where people could perhaps get in touch with you and use your film to within their campaigns and communities as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Keep SARAY Home, or keepsarayhome.com is our website, and we're very much interested in collaborating with people to host screenings with community organizations and student groups and whatnot, to really propel some activism around these issues.
Thank you so much, Brian, for your film, for your activism, and for just your thought process. And I'm sure our audiences will get in touch with you and make sure that your film is seen by a lot of people in the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Up next is another short film called "To Live Here" by Melanie Ho. And I will invite Melanie to join me in this conversation.
Hi, thanks for
Hi,
having me
Melanie.
here.
Of course. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your film with us. So Melanie is the filmmaker for "To Live Here," which is a very poetic look at, I mean, I don't want to use the word mundane, but the everydayness of Vietnamese shrimpers in New Orleans. And it's really so beautifully, there's so much poetry and there's so much silence in the film, which is not something that we see in usual documentaries about immigration. So what inspired you to make it and make it this way?
Well, thank you so much for your kind words. And I think mundane is like a really good word to use. I think about that word a lot too, actually. But in terms of like the silence and the kind of form that to live here, Shanghai takes on, it's mainly like an observational form because I'm like behind the camera, I'm the editor, I'm the filmmaker, and I feel like I live my life a lot through observations. From growing up, observing my family, observing my parents, kind of observing the trauma that they have, but also like the way that they just live life, the way that they found home in Jacksonville, Florida. And so to me, that kind of observation translates over to kind of the way that the film has been created in terms of the silence, this long form, like I'm going to stare at this boat for a few seconds. And I just want the audience to be in that observational state as well.
No, and like, I'm sure the audiences agree with me that, I mean, you really compel the audiences to do that. I also wanted to ask you a little question, maybe, and this is a theme in your film about belonging, because the people in the film, there's this part, and it's like, I remember laughing out loud where they say, men in Vietnam are living the life. We are here suffering. So, and, within the Asian American community and the immigrant community, the larger immigrant community, we get asked so many times, where are we from? Where are we really from? So I just wanted you to talk about, this idea of belonging and, what does it mean in your film to you as a filmmaker and to the people in your film?
Ooh, I feel like that's a tough question.
Yeah, that's a PhD thesis. I know, no pressure.
Yeah. I have to like dig deep into my mind into that. But I don't know. To me, belonging, I think location is a really big factor in terms of like belonging, either feeling at home or feeling like you're a part of a community. And for me, I think like I'm really interested in telling stories from the South because I was born and raised in the South. And there's an interesting way of thinking about belonging in the South, because I think when regular people think about the South, they're not thinking about like Vietnamese communities that are living in the South. There's like a huge population of Vietnamese folks that are living in the South. And the way that I see that they found belonging is kind of like bringing the homeland in from Vietnam, like what they're familiar with in Vietnam, like how they live their life in Vietnam, what makes them comfortable in Vietnam, and kind of it's like a reflection. That's what I saw when I was in New Orleans, on the shrimping boat, on this farm garden. And so it's like, how do you bring things that you're familiar with? How do you bring your memories back to the physical location that you are and kind of make that your home? So I don't know if that answers the question, but I think that's like what I saw in terms of belonging in the film.
Yeah, but also, I'm so happy that you demystified the idea of the South, but also demystifying the idea of New Orleans, because this is not what we see. This is not what people talk about. But I was curious as to the journey of your film so far. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
In terms of like the process, or
the process, of course, and you touched a bit upon the process, but also, who has seen this film? Has it traveled to festivals yet? And what have been the audience reactions largely?
Yeah, so it's actually from my MFA thesis film. So I went to UCSC in the social documentation program, and that's where it first had viewers. That's where it started out from, and from there, I've been lucky enough to have it shown in the Seattle Asian American Film Festival, and here I am. I'm very excited for that, and also something that I've been trying to do, and I've been a little bit successful, but still working on, is bringing it back to university settings, because I think I want it to be a conversation starter, a film that can hold space for conversations, dialogues. Intergenerational dialogues are really important to me as well. So trying to bring it back to both universities and also communities. So yeah.
Now, if it were up to me, I would give you an A on your thesis, because this is such a beautiful film. And I know, this is such a fruitful conversation, but we only have so much time. But if our audiences were to keep in touch with you and keep themselves updated on your film, or perhaps if they wanted to play their film within their communities, how would they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so the film has a website. It's at xiaoguanifilm.com. And I also have an Instagram, Melanie Dang Ho.
All right. Thank you so much, Melanie. And thank you again for your fantastic film. I'm very excited to see its journey in the future.
Thank you so much.
Of course. Up next is Charles Zhang, who with Alina Peng made the documentary 83 and Alone, which again questions the idea of belonging, questions the idea of what it means as a community to say they belong to a particular place, and also the challenges that modern living, climate change throws up, and how these challenges forces the people from these places to question belonging and question the idea of home. So, Charles, welcome.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Of course, Charles, and thank you again for your film and for sharing it with us. And personally, I'm from India, so Bhutan is a neighbor, and I've grown up in India. I have never heard about the water crisis in Bhutan. So could you and since your film is about that, could you perhaps talk about how you came to know about it and why you decided to make a film about it?
Yeah, so totally like you, I think I was also pretty shocked to hear about some of the different like water scarcity issues that Bhutan is facing. I think a lot of the times in the media, it's characterized as a very environmentalist, very sort of pro-nature country, and that's a big part of its national identity, which is why we saw some amount of irony in terms of how they prioritize environmentalism so much, yet they're also suffering a lot from the environmental impacts of climate change. So I think that's one of the reasons why we ultimately decided to film 83 and Alone, is just because we felt like in the media, climate change is characterized so much by very sort of cold, hard statistics in terms of like net carbon emissions, how much like degrees Celsius is going up, funding pledges from different institutions. Yeah, we really wanted to focus on a very intimate story that focuses on an elderly man and sort of how he and his family and his community is adapting to water scarcity. So those are sort of the, that's ultimately why we decided to film 83 and Alone.
Yeah, and also, what I loved about the film, and you kind of touched upon it in your answer, that you focus on one man and his family, but then also have a larger eye on the larger event, which is forcing migration, and which again, when conferences, film festivals, they talk about the global South, Bhutan is not a country that that comes up in those conversations. So I would be interested in knowing, about your personal experiences about filming in Bhutan, and just what was that like?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so I think like you, there's sort of a lot of conversations going on about sort of, yeah, like the global south, who or like the populations that are mainly being affected by climate change and water scarcity. We felt like as we were filming this, there were a lot of sort of groups and communities that were being left out of that conversation, which is one of the reasons why we wanted to sort of focus on Bhutan and sort of focus like the film on these types of communities. I think as we were filming in Bhutan, it was really interesting because it's a very, very diverse country. There's many different types of climates within the country. So there were certain areas where water scarcity wasn't an issue at all. And then we would drive maybe for a few hours, and it's a very sort of like mountainous region. And there would be a totally different village with a completely separate type of climate that was suffering a lot from these different kinds of water scarcity issues. So I think it was very sort of enlightening and also a very insightful experience where we got to understand, even in a country that may seem relatively small in comparison to the surrounding nations, even their own climate experiences are very personal to different kinds of communities, and it entirely depends on, or it can entirely vary a lot based on just like where you are within the country.
Thank you so much. And based on what you saw, did you see some kind of community organizing? Because mostly the characters we see in the film, they're very old, and they're kind of I don't know how to put it, but kind of resigned to fate and destiny somehow, because the protagonist says that, we don't have much to do apart from staying back and praying. But when you were there, did you see some kind of community organizing around these climate change issues?
Yeah, so there are some amounts of community organizing. I think it wasn't as much in terms of a very sort of large like institution that was involved. We did some collaboration with the Royal University of Bhutan, who we actually produced the film in association with, and they were doing a lot of research in terms of water scarcity. I think most of the community organizing that was involved was mainly neighbors helping neighbors. In the film, and I don't want to talk about it or spoil it too much, but so like the elderly man, Doll, he was getting help from some other kids who lived around him. So there's definitely sort of much more, I guess, tight-knit type community organizing. There wasn't as much of a sort of super structured, I guess, organization that was there sort of helping out, but I think it was more so just like neighbor helping neighbor type that we mainly saw while we were there.
Yeah, and I think that is exactly why all of us should watch Charles and Alina's film, share it amongst our communities, bring it to the attention of climate change policymakers, and just talk about this, because this is a part of the world facing a problem which nobody's talking about and nobody's aware of. Charles, so thank you so much for making this film. And if people were to get in touch with you so that they can show your film, where should they get in touch with you?
Yeah, to stay in touch, they can find my Instagram at Charles with 2 C's and 5 S's, or on Twitter at I'm Charles Zhang. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much, Charles. And moving on to the last film on our short film program is the film is called Stand Up. It's directed by Dasha Masaltina and Kitty Hu. And Kitty has been kind enough to join us for a conversation about the film. Welcome, Kitty.
Thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you for coming, and thank you for, that fantastic, funny, yet emotional, yet, I'm just running out of words. But, it's just like, thank you so much for fitting in so many emotions into a short film.
No, I appreciate that. I think we also just wanted to have a good time, and it was probably one of the most fun sets I've been on, so I think that speaks to it.
Yeah, there's comedy, there's dancing, there's a little budding romance, so it's fantastic. But if you could talk a little bit about how you got around to making this film with Dasha.
Yeah, so we actually first met Tatiana and Diana. I met them through a respectability event when I was still in LA, and we just hit it off and became friends. And Tatiana and I were drinking coffee at one point, and she was telling me about her experiences at the club and going to the bar, and how her being in a wheelchair, people would just say the craziest things, and always think it was like a special occasion or something in order for her to be able to go out. And they were also talking a lot about, oh, we just want to make more films. Like, we're doing some modeling stuff, we're doing some random commercial stuff. Like, we just want to make a fictional film. And so I was still in school, and Dasha as well. And so we were like, well, we're students. We have access to film school materials, like people who will help us work on this. And so that's how this project kind of came to be. And we wanted to write it for them and just have it be like a fun project for them to be able to work on.
Yeah, and for just to remind our audiences, Tatiana is the protagonist of the film. She is a stand-up comic, a fantastic dancer, and a wheelchair user. So Kitty, this film is also, it is about community, but not in an overt way in which we see community building and organizing. But there is a beautiful friendship, and there are more than one beautiful friendships, and that form within the context of that one night in the nightclub. I hope I'm not giving much of the plot away, but was community building one of the themes that you were thinking of when you were watching the film?
Yeah, we were definitely thinking a lot just about our own relationships and trying to poke fun or call out maybe some of the ignorant relationships that we might have. And so with them, it was just, I mean, it's such a low bar, honestly, to be able to see disabled people as regular people having fun in a comic bar setting. But that's kind of at least some of the narrative that we were pushing for, to just be able to have that community all together, regardless of background or ability.
And, lately there has been some kind of conversation around accessible documentary filmmaking and also accessible documentary viewing. And your film definitely starts a lot of those conversations. Do you want to perhaps talk a little bit about how you plan to use your film, in furthering those conversations?
Yeah, I think this film was also just a big learning lesson for me too, learning about audio descriptions and how to do them better and how to really integrate them into your work from the very beginning of a film project. And I think it's also just really helped spark conversations and thoughts around accessibility being a part of our default in all our settings, whether it's in film or organizing or workplaces. Just really being able to recognize that we're all involved and affected by disability justice work. And kind of like what Brian was saying, with incarcerated folks, like disabled folks get cast aside or can be discarded so easily when we all know someone, or we all may become, or we see like disability affecting us in all these different ways. And it's not so much about someone's specific ability, but really just thinking about how do we make sure that everyone has equal access and equal power. And so I'm really hoping that with this film, but also with other films like Crip Camp, that this just really becomes something that is deeply integrated into our work.
Yeah, and one thing I absolutely loved in the film was all the woke, nice people. The nice people in the film were all people of color, which I think was so amazing. And I think as a community of, communities of color, I think it's really a very inspiring film, and we have to band together and stand up for disability rights, not just for people who live with disabilities, but also for ourselves, like you said. So if someone were to show your film within their communities, what would be the best way to get in touch with you?
I'm reachable on Instagram or Twitter really easily at KittyXWho, and I'm more than happy to share resources with folks, whether it's with FWD Doc or like the Helen Keller National Center, and also would want folks to learn more from Mia Mingus as well, who's a disability rights justice who I've learned a lot from.
Thank you so much, Kitty, for making the film, but also for holding space for these fantastic organizations that I hope all our audiences get in touch with and learn from. No, of course. And before, calling it a night, I'd like to invite all our filmmakers so that we can, from wherever we are, we can give them a big round of applause. Thank you so much for helping me and helping the audiences question what it means to belong and who actually belongs in this country and beyond, and then how to with absolute pride insert ourselves into these conversations. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
So that was it for this shorts program, but there's so many more interesting films and program for the rest of the CamFest. So I hope you enjoy the rest of the festival. Stay safe and take care of yourselves. Thank you.